Hello, health enthusiasts. If you are looking to optimize your body's natural detoxification processes, you're in luck because I have an exclusive free guide just for you. It's called How to Optimize Detoxification, and it's packed with my top 8 tips to help you support your body's ability to eliminate toxins effectively. In this guide, you'll discover the key organs involved in detoxification and how to keep them functioning at their best, nutritional strategies to enhance your body's natural detox pathways, lifestyle habits that can make a big difference in your overall toxin load, and much more. To get your hands on this valuable resource, simply head over to www.rootcausology.com/detox and download your free copy today. That's www.rootcausology.com/DETOX. Trust me, your body will thank you for taking the time to learn these essential detoxification tips. Now let's dive into today's episode. Hello, and welcome to Get to the Root of It. I am Laurel Brennan, the host, and I'm very excited to be here tonight with Ryan Glatt. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you for having me.
So real quick, Ryan Glatt is a certified personal trainer and a national board certified health and wellness coach with over a decade of experience. He focuses his exercise and health coaching strategies on brain health, personalizing lifestyle interventions for individuals with brain and cognitive health goals. Ryan is a brain health coach and the director of the Fit Brain program at Pacific Neuroscience Institute. So welcome. I want to hear more about all of that. But first, I want to hear a little about you. Tell us about Ryan. What in your journey got you to where you are today?
Well, it's a serpentine journey. I have had ADHD from a concussion that I had when I was a kid, probably a little bit of genetic risk in there as well. And my journey started with a very strong interest in animal behavior. I wanted to be an exotic animal trainer. I don't know why. I just liked Animal Planet growing up as a kid, and my parents never questioned that. So in my hometown of Moore Park, California, which is in Ventura County, California, which is about an hour outside of Los Angeles, there was actually the nation's only exotic animal training and management program at a community college. So I was like, that's my thing. So I've always been fascinated by like psychology and animal behavior, of course, human behavior. And then as I was quite overweight as a child, like I said, I had a concussion. Also grew up in the 90s. I was born in 91. So I really was obsessed with video games, probably to a detriment. I was the fat kid that always finished last in the mile, never got picked for sports teams, never played sports, was terrible in school, really just hyper interested in video games. And so a lot of people are like, oh, how's that possible? You're such a nerd now. I'm like, totally. But I was just terrible in school, terrible socially, terrible physically. And something came out called Dance Dance Revolution, which is a video game that involves stepping in different directions in response to music. And that game actually got me moving, kind of harnessed my video game addiction to improve my movement capacity, lose weight. And I didn't know it at the time, but actually get better cognitively. And there's a lot of research to show why that is. From that point forward, I became more interested in health and fitness. And then I joined a gym, got even more fit, wanted to help other people do that. And around that same time, my mother was struggling with kidney disease that stemmed from gestational diabetes from when she gave birth to me, had a leg amputation, went through a lot of rehabilitation. I'd go to her with her to her physical therapy appointments. I said, I want to do what this physical therapist is doing for my mother now. I felt it was so inspiring, and they were really walking alongside her figuratively and literally. And they were even using exergaming, which is active video games like the Nintendo Wii, to get her to help with weight transfer onto her prosthetic limb. And so from there, I got my bachelor's in exercise science as almost a goal of pre-physical therapy, kind of went away from the animal behavior stuff, applied to physical therapy schools as many as I could, didn't get into any of them because my grades were not great. And then I decided to apply abroad. So I got into a physiotherapy program in Scotland, I did a gap year in the Gambia of West Africa, working in some physical therapy programs there, doing some volunteer work, just taking some time off of traditional schooling, getting some experience. Went to Scotland, had the wrong visa, got put in immigration detention, and then deported back to LA. So, as Ryan stumbles throughout his life, I became a massage therapist, specifically a rolfer, doing rolfing and structural body work as a way of kind of doing manual therapy with movement. Became very interested in human behavior. I would, work with people on pain and posture. And I was curious, like, why did or did not people follow up with the thing that I was telling them to do? Pursued health coaching, and also kind of started to think about, my own family history with dementia and mental health in my family, my own concussion history, and really just becoming fascinated with the brain. I get bored easily, as you can probably tell, both a personal thing and a symptom of ADHD. And so I need endlessly fascinating things. I was kind of changing jobs every year, that type of thing. And I was just like really thinking like, okay, from an exercise standpoint, from a health and wellness standpoint, if I were to want to help someone with their brain health, not for weight loss, not for pain, not for posture, what would I do differently? I know this is like all good stuff, exercise and lifestyle modification, but what would I do differently with someone if they said, I want to improve my brain health, I want to prevent dementia, I want to improve my cognition, as maybe I have a neurodevelopmental condition, an acquired brain injury, or a neurodegenerative condition. I kind of just dove into research informally, and I didn't really know how to read research. I was just reading, and kind of learning about the effects of exercise on the brain, and starting to learn about this idea of when you combine a cognitive and a physical task, that can actually be really helpful for cognition and other outcomes. Started to find out research on exergaming, like Dance Dance Revolution, the thing that got me out of my lifestyle issues, frankly, and really improved my cognition. And so I started to see these dots connecting between exercise science, rehabilitation, neuroscience, and gaming. And I kind of I didn't really know how it made sense, but I started to just like follow that. And there wasn't any carved out, very specific path that made sense that accommodated all of those things. And so I'm like, what if I did what I did as a trainer, as a health coach, and really kind of just tried to pursue interventions that help with people's brain health from the perspective of exercise primarily, with also this idea of added exergaming. So I worked at a neurofeedback facility, and I started studying neuroscience, and I started to go to people's homes and use colored dots and lights and have people react to things and give them cognitively demanding tasks. I work with children who are on the spectrum to individuals with Parkinson's and older adults, and just kind of getting experience, really just doing what I thought made sense. Eventually, I reached out to a couple researchers. There's one, Dr. Sarah McEwen at UCLA, who was combining exercise and cognitive training together for older adults. I found that research very fascinating. Reached out to her, said she was joining the Pacific Neuroscience Institute, met the founder of the Pacific Brain Health Center, Dr. David Merrill. He said, I want to start a brain gym. I said, so do I. And that was 5 years ago. And to this day, we have a brain gym with equipment from extended reality, virtual reality, lights, and boards, and dynamic stepping tools, and clinical exergames, really. I'm about to finish up a PhD program. I've created some of my own exergames. I consult for these companies, consult for other individuals trying to start their own brain gyms. And now I have a course called the Brain Health Trainer course that we train health and fitness professionals about exercise in the brain and kind of what to do about it based on people's goals. So, like I said, serpentine and very random, but happy to be where I am now.
Yeah, awesome. You told me ahead of time that you talk fast.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, but you got so much in. You got so much in. You told us your story. That's fantastic. I think that you are an occupational therapist, even though you don't have the training.
It's funny. I look up, I think I told you this when we talked before, I look up to OT and actually all the rehabilitation clinicians as like the coolest clinicians around. Like, and what I love about PNI is we have amazing speech language pathologists, physical therapists. We now have an occupational therapist coming on board, neuropsychologist, psychiatrist. And, I always think I'm like, should I be a clinician? And I'm always comparing myself to that sometimes, from intelligence or, the ability to have insurance covered services. I'm really happy with where I'm at. I'm basically a medical exercise professional, where I'm a fitness professional and a health coach within this clinical environment, in this clinical team playing a role. I'm very happy there. And there's so many overlapping things if we took a Venn diagram of people like OTs and like PTs, where I'm not fulfilling those functions, I'm not diagnosing, I'm not treating, but exercise and cognition and participation, behavior change, those are all things we all share, right? And I think what's really inspiring is how can we all stay within our scope of practice, but collaborate at a multidisciplinary level to really deliver better care to people. And that's why I love the Pacific Neuroscience Institute.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you're helping people find meaningful and purposeful activity, which is like the
That's the hope.
foundation of occupational therapy. And
That's the
like
hope.
last time, yeah, yeah. And you're making it fun. You're making it fun.
That's also the hope. And if that's not the case, because, we're not miracle workers here, then we have these behavioral negotiations. I think when people and engaging in things like motivational interviewing, and I think when people are told to do something that's like, you must exercise 150 minutes a week, it's like, that's great. But have we talked about this person's preferences? Have we talked about this person's experiences, their affordances, their environment, their support systems? And I think if we're interested in actual sustainable behavior change, whatever that might mean, we have to consider what people prefer, just like with food. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think people forget that people are people. And so when you start to recall that, it certainly helps with the behavior change.
Yeah. When I did a health coach training and learned about motivational interviewing, and I was like, oh, if I could just use that on my kids. And I explained to them, I learned this thing that when people are ambivalent about whether or not they want to make a change, when you tell them to do something, they're less likely to do it. And my daughter's like, yes, Mom.
Yeah.
So when you tell me to clean my room when I kind of knew that I should, but then you told me to do it, like I absolutely don't want to do it, like at all.
That's quite the intelligent conversation you're having with your kids. I wish I had that level of conversation with my parents when I was a kid. But essentially, yes. I mean, I think people hear, like, let's just take dementia prevention as a relevant goal that we'll probably discuss and people want to hear about. We know we need to exercise for that. But if you're ambivalent to exercise and then you're told to exercise to prevent the thing that you fear, there's a lot going on there. There's kind of a lot of baggage. So sometimes fear motivation is very helpful for behavior change. On the other hand, we have to address that ambivalence and understand why there's ambivalence. Sometimes it's because people just don't know from an executive functioning standpoint how the scheduling or the planning or the timing will work out, or the distance from their home. They think they might have to go to a gym, or they might think it costs way too much money, or that person might believe they have a limited number of heartbeats and they don't want to waste that. So we just have to understand where people are coming from. And when we do that, I think things are a lot easier. And to your point, when we have family members, or spouses or parents or children telling us what to do, there's this communication bias because we're close that I think both parties maybe aren't using the best communication skills. And they say, we throw up our hands in the air. It's like, oh, they didn't listen to me. It's like, well, we didn't really go further into that conversation.
Yeah. And also, I probably need you to come into my house because it's not really great to try to be the therapist to your spouse or your kids. It doesn't work well.
Yeah. Outsourcing those types of things is helpful, but also just being like extra conscious of the things we say and how we say them. Very difficult. I'm working on it all the time. And a lot of times I'm just, active listening skills and, communication strategies. It's just like, let's not jump to conclusions. Like I have a lot of people either about themselves or their loved ones saying like, they're lazy or I'm lazy. I'm like, or you're just externally accountable. There's the people that wake up and go for a run at 5 a.m. without anyone telling them to. I hate those people. I don't hate those people, but I'm not that person. I need external accountability. Even though I've studied this stuff for over a decade, I still need external accountability. That's nothing to be ashamed of. That's just the way it is. And I think once people start to understand that we all have these preferences, these accountability styles, and that there's a whole universe of strategies to get someone to do the thing that's good for them or that we believe is good for them, it's a little less exhausting, I hope. It just takes more time. We can come from a place of understanding. And there's a lot more we can do for brain health when we look at it that way.
So let's go down that road a little bit. You said there's a bunch of strategies, things you can do. So I have shared with, my group, my followers, my clients, what has worked for me. Mm-hmm. But that's just one suggestion. Like for me, I learned a long time ago that I also need that external kind of thing. Right. I have to join a team so that my teammates are depending on me and I don't want to let them down.
Right.
I have to have 4 or 5 friends that like to do what I do and will call me up and say, hey, do you want to go for a walk? Do you want to go for a hike? And then
Sure.
I get the benefit of socialization, the benefit of being in nature, and the exercise. So it's like
There
this
you go.
win-win-win.
Yeah.
And I've always been a fitness instructor because I mostly because I'm cheap and I don't want to pay for a gym membership. So I'm like, but if I work at the gym, then I get a free gym membership. So
Yeah.
that's been,
It's funny
what.
how I'm the same way, where we work in the same industry, convincing people to pay us, and then we don't want to pay for that thing.
Mhm.
I'm very much the same way. So it's kind of ironic, perhaps a little bit of a juxtaposition, but I'm the same way. Yes.
So what are some, so if somebody comes to you, well, okay,
Mhm.
2 things. Tell us about your environment, the Pacific Neuroscience Institute, what
Mhm.
you do there.
Mhm.
And then say somebody comes and they don't know, um, they're struggling to exercise. So what could be one of the things or 2 of the things or 10 of the things that you recommend to somebody that might be helpful?
Sure. So when people come into the Pacific Neuroscience Institute, most of the time it's through a clinical setting. So there's clinical and non-clinical activities that we have. So usually someone's referred by a doctor and maybe they have some cognitive impairment. They want to get assessed and they'll see a neuropsychologist, neurologist, maybe our psychiatrist, and kind of get a full wraparound diagnosis and really understanding what's happening to their brain. They might be usually when they're referred to me from the clinic, which I'm part of the non-clinical side. I'm part of our lifestyle programs at PNI. Then usually they already have some sort of diagnosis. Maybe they just got diagnosed with MCI and they get a large after visit summary or a packet of information about all the things they can do. And it's quite overwhelming for people typically because you're dealing with a diagnosis and there's a lot of information to take in and you're thinking about a lot. And so sometimes when people are referred to me, they either want to take part in our Fit Brain program, which is our brain gym, if you will, where I see people in one-on-one or group settings, and we stimulate the brain and body simultaneously with these different novel XR gaming technologies. But oftentimes when I'm doing a consult, in my head, I'm thinking about how can I get this? How can I offer a customized exercise program for this person's brain health from their perspective, their desires, understanding them as a person, and that's really what's most important to me. So I'll wear my coaching hat even if they come to me thinking my trainer hat is on, but I'm wearing my coaching hat. And basically, they may have a certain level of knowledge or pre-existing behavior change already based on conversation with the doctor or maybe a nutritionist, another health coach, who knows. But when they're with me, I'm just taking in all the information about their exercise programs, what are they currently doing. So type, is it aerobic? Is it resistance? Is it neuromotor? The number of minutes for each, the amount of intensity, low, moderate, or vigorous, the frequency, the duration. And I'm putting all that down and I'm kind of calculating, the number of minutes per week, looking at the intensities and kind of having a big picture eagle eye view of where might they need more assistance, where might they need to tweak things if their goal was brain health. Sometimes it's about dementia prevention. Sometimes it's about stopping or slowing conversion of MCI to dementia. Sometimes they have dementia. They want to minimize or manage unwanted behaviors. Some people want to maybe improve a specific aspect of cognition, like memory or processing speed. And my goal and my job is to have that exercise program reflect that. And so once I get all this information, I'm looking for several key things. There's probably 4 or 5 things that I'm looking for. The first one is, are they hitting a minimum of 150 minutes a week of exercise? That's the first thing. And the reason that is because the physical activity guidelines for Americans, which is a massive review, and everyone's heard this 150 minutes number, but it's a massive review and it includes brain health benefits of all the different exercise interventions. What's that like average, regular kind of minimum dosage to elicit these positive health benefits, both in brain and body? And so 150 minutes is that minimum. And the reason that's important to know, even though it might be redundant for us and even for other people we work with, is 80% of older adults roughly are not reaching that number. And so I think it's important to start with that so we don't over confuse what's most important as a priority, right? And like that's the foundation. So most people are near that or reaching that. Sometimes they're not there at all, and we want to get them there over a period of time. Then I'm looking at the intensity. What's kind of the average intensity? If they're doing 150 minutes of walking, that's great, but that might be a low intensity, and that recommendation is moderate intensity or greater. So maybe we need to dial up that intensity knob a little bit. And then I'm looking for variety. So I'm looking for what modalities of exercise they have: aerobic, anything that gets above resting heart rate, resistance training, and what I call neuromotor exercise. It's not what I call it; it's just what's recommended and how it's called. It's also called motor exercise, skill-based exercise. There's a few synonyms for it, and most people don't hear about that one. It's basically dance, sports, martial arts, anything that requires coordination, but also mind-body exercise like Tai Chi, Qigong, and yoga. And I'm usually looking to see, okay, do they have the right number of minutes, the right amount of intensities, or the right variability of exercise types? And usually one of those screams to me first. Usually it's variability, and also maybe intensity. And so those are usually things I'm trying to tweak. And this is regardless of age or diagnosis. And there's usually enough research in any population to suggest exercise is good for the brain and cognition. And the theory is, and of course there's data to support this theory, that if we do several different types, aerobic, resistant, neuromotor, we have a combination of low, moderate, and high intensities, we're 150 minutes or greater. That's a more brain healthy exercise program, kind of more well-rounded exercise program, as well as it's going to address things like sarcopenia and osteopenia and prevent falls and all that, increase socialization. And so those are the main things I'm looking for. It's quite basic, but I'm very surprised to see that regardless of age, diagnosis, how well someone's doing, how many podcasts they've listened to, how many coaches they've seen, how rare it is for me to see someone checking off all those boxes. So there's always more work to do there.
Right. That's perfect. I love that you broke it down very clearly. I'm just going to backtrack for anyone who might not know what MCI is. That is mild cognitive impairment. So you usually get someone at the clinic who has already gotten a diagnosis of MCI or dementia.
Or subjective cognitive impairment. They've noticed some cognitive deficits. While it should be more of a norm, it's a little bit more rare for someone to say, I don't have any symptoms, but I'm going to go get a baseline of my brain health. That's what I think is preferred for us. But I think most of the time, even for healthy adults or moderately healthy adults, that we don't really go to a clinical setting unless we have or perceive a problem. And for many people, they're waiting too long to do this. And so early detection is key. And that's why I love what Dr. Dale Bredesen says. Everyone should get a cognoscopy. Right. Nobody, well, I don't want to say nobody, but most people I don't think get a colonoscopy for fun. And so people should be going, we do it for the obvious things of assessing risk factors and, screening and early detection, and brain health should be no different. But unfortunately at this time, most of the time people are coming to us with a cognitive impairment of some kind. So it could be subjective cognitive impairment. There's no diagnosis, but they're not normal or they don't feel they're normal. Mild cognitive impairment, as you said, is a diagnosable condition where one or domains of cognition are impaired significantly. And then dementia is just defined as, it's really an umbrella term, dementia cognitive impairment severe enough to interfere with everyday activities, and Alzheimer's being the most common. And so we get people across that whole spectrum. And the approach that I've laid out is kind of the same. It's just there's if someone has dementia, there might be some other behavior change challenges where I can't just say, okay, go exercise 5 times a week and then be surprised they didn't do that on their own. We might need some environmental changes or accountability. And you're laughing, but unfortunately, many people expect that. Like, I told my grandma or my mom with dementia to exercise and she didn't. I'm like, well, I think we need to change the environment. Have we talked about what they enjoy? But like I said, the generalized approach and individualization is still very much the same.
Yeah. Okay. So the 3 categories. So the 150 minutes a week and
minimum
and intensity. You're looking at intensity.
Moderate intensity or greater for at least the aerobic and resistance components.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So these are like goals that we're recommending to optimize brain health, whether we're 20 or we're 80 or we're anywhere in between, whether we have cognitive.
Generally adhering to these things. They just happen to be also applicable for brain health, because there's a lot of systematic reviews out there that look at aerobic exercise for the hippocampus, the memory center, resistance training for the frontal lobes, neuromotor training for the basal ganglia and cerebellum. So, we like to go after all those areas and take care of all those areas. So if we want a whole brain workout, a whole brain healthy exercise program, we should probably do a variety of these things. And regardless of your age or who you are, your experience, you have a bias. You avoid things you don't like. You do things that you do and that are habitual. And oftentimes when we make it about brain health, we also incorporate the cognitive piece, which is about novel learning, cognitive stimulation. And I spend far too much of my time convincing 70-year-old men to join a dance class, which they've avoided their whole lives, for the purpose of brain health. I said, you should join it because you suck at it. That's novel learning. That's cognitive stimulation. And there's more research for things like Tai Chi and dance than any of the extra game stuff I'm talking about. So, it's really about checking off those boxes and making sure people are covering their bases. Now, how quickly we do that and what percentage of those boxes we cover over what period of time, that's the highly variable part. That depends on so many of those different individual factors, environmental factors, and whatnot.
And that's when you're looking at the person that's right in front of you and trying to find what I call the just right challenge for them.
Right.
Something that they want to do, or it's not boring, it's not too hard, it's not too easy, it's just right.
I just saw someone yesterday that was just diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. It was a surprise to him and his wife, and he wanted to know what he should be doing. We had the same conversation of kind of what we're talking about now. And I got an email saying, we're so overwhelmed by what you said. And, Monday through Friday for 30 minutes each day, that's too much. I said, well, I'm sorry. What I didn't clarify was that this is a long-term goal. You don't have to start this tomorrow. And so we negotiated. I said, what about 3 days a week? Fine. And so even though that's 90 minutes a week, that's better than zero. They're still going to get benefits, and they're going to add to that when they feel ready. And that's perfectly fine. There's no reason to say, we got to get on that right now. Yes, there's urgency to a degree, but at a macro level, we can get there. And research shows that it takes about 52 hours of exercise for older adults with and without cognitive impairments to significantly improve processing speed and executive functioning. And 52 hours over what period of time is the question, but that depends on the frequency and the duration of the exercise you're doing. And so if you're exercising every day for an hour, you're going to reach that 52 hours in 3 months. If you're exercising 3 days a week, it's going to take you 6 to 12 months, perhaps, depending on if it's 30 or 60 minutes, 3 days a week. And so there's this dosage response of exercise where we talk about exercise as medicine, but we never talk about the dosage. We never talk about the ingredients. We never talk about how to spread it over time, just like real medication. And so this 52 hours dose is very interesting to me. And so my goal is to get people to those parameters of the 150, the variety of the 3 types of exercise, the mix of low, moderate, and high intensity, and then keep them on that program until they hit 52 hours, in which we don't stop, we keep going. Obviously, we do this for the rest of our lives. And hopefully through that process, we're really taking care of the brain, hopefully improving cognition, and also addressing things like, sarcopenia, bone mass, fall prevention, and all those things.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I was trying to mute to cough. I have this cold, but I'm going to cough in the mic.
I think that's perfectly fine with me in the audience.
It happens.
Yes.
So just to clarify, sarcopenia, again, I'm going to be the
clarifier.
The vocab here. Yes.
Sure.
For people who might not know. Can you tell people what sarcopenia is?
Yeah. So sarcopenia it's defined as muscle loss or muscle wasting. Essentially, as we age, we can lose muscle mass, and we want to optimize. So over the lifespan, we have something available to us, neuroplasticity. It's the characteristic of the brain to be able to change. And in order to elicit that neuroplasticity, we need more physical effort and cognitive effort in later years than we do in earlier years. For sarcopenia and bone mass, it's very much the same thing. We are declining, and you will not be able to gain muscle as easily as you were when you were younger, but it's still possible. It just requires more time and effort. And so sarcopenia, when it is the muscle loss that can occur with aging, that can be offset or prevented by doing sufficient amounts of resistance training.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for clarifying that for everyone. And I have not heard the 52 number, the dosage before. So I'm gonna
interesting about that one. That was a large systematic review by Dr. Joyce Gomez Osman, I think in 2018. And essentially they found, over all these studies that they looked at for those with dementia, without dementia, specifically for older adults, so 65 years and older, that it took about that much amount of time to get significant improvements in processing speed and executive function, the CEO of your frontal lobe, if you will. And it didn't matter, like I said, if they had cognitive impairment or not. And this is contradictory to what I've been saying to a degree, and I can explain why, that it didn't really matter what kind of exercise it was. Could have been Tai Chi, could have been walking programs, could have been strength programs. So the reason that I think that they found that the type of exercise didn't matter is because those types of reviews aren't really sensitive to type as much. But there's a lot of other research showing that there's these differential benefits of exercise. But I think we can lean back on that and say, like, well, if this is too complicated, which I often am, and too wordy, which I often am, and too overwhelming, which I often am, then as long as we do enough exercise to get to 52 hours, it might not matter what type it is. It might not matter their level of impairment. I tend to overthink it and want to go further and optimize and all that. But it's good to know, like, let's just be active as much as we can without and when I say as much as we can, I don't really mean 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, but within reasonable parameters and getting people slightly more active to get closer to that number, I think is a good goal to have.
Yeah. So you're saying if you mix it up, if you had like 5 different exercises, as long as you got 52 hours total, you would see cognitive improvement over that time period.
According to this review. And I mean, it's hard to read into it too much, but we basically, in plain terms, we want to exercise about 3 to 5 days a week for 30 to 60 minutes at an average moderate intensity or greater for 6 to 12 months. That's pretty much the gist of it. And we don't stop once we've hit those 52 hours. Once again, we keep going.
Yeah.
That's just when people sometimes ask, well, when can I expect benefit? And depending on the person and the intervention, it's a helpful answer to have in our back pocket. And we don't know if that's true for everybody because, if this person has untreated sleep apnea and they're not stimulating their brains and their diet is terrible, then we don't know what that looks like, right? They didn't control for those variables, so we don't know. But yeah, I think we should just try to be more active sometimes.
Yeah. But I'm glad to know about that study. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you've talked about variety of exercise, different activities, and especially things that use mind and body together.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we call that dual task learning.
Sometimes,
So
yeah. So to break down this
a little bit.
Yeah, so to break down this neuromotor category, so we have aerobic and resistance, and then this neuromotor category. And so under neuromotor, we have 2 subcategories. We have things like dance, sports, and martial arts, which can get our heart rate up and be coordinative and cognitively demanding at the same time. And then we have things like mind-body exercise, like yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, Pilates. And those things also can stimulate our muscles and our heart and be demanding there. There's research showing Tai Chi, which isn't, getting your heart rate up super high, can actually improve lipid profiles and blood pressure and all sorts of things. And then that's kind of the mind-body exercise category. And one way of achieving a cognitive and a motor task is dual tasking and or exergaming. We've described exergaming, Dance Dance Revolution, Nintendo Wii. There's virtual reality headsets now that are consumer grade that people can play tennis and table tennis and dancing and boxing, which I think is great. And so exergaming and dual tasking are 2 ways of having simultaneous cognitive and physical load. Dual tasking is defined as when you have a simultaneous cognitive task and a simultaneous motor task with distinct goals at the same time. So to put this in plain English, if I'm texting while walking, that's dual tasking. If I'm talking to someone and having a conversation while on a hike, that's dual tasking. It is not multitasking. And dual tasking is these 2 things are happening in parallel. So my conversation with you, if I'm walking with you, has the goal of conversation, but the walking has a goal of going from A to B. And so those are different goals. We could measure them separately, and they are done at the same time. And as we age, dual task ability tends to decrease. And so you might also notice if you had a really bad night of sleep that walking and talking or carrying a cup of coffee and texting while you walk around is a little bit harder. And that's because our frontal lobes maybe aren't working as well. And we can actually not only train, but also assess dual task ability, but also train dual task ability to improve in many different populations. And so the most common example of dual tasking is walking while counting backwards or walking while talking. And think of these cognitive tasks that we might do on a brain game. You could have someone walk and say words that start with the letter A, for instance. And there's 100 different examples of this dual tasking. What's important is that people know that this can increase their risk for falls because it's distracting, but with the right supervision of a physical therapist, it's actually really a type of physical therapy, or the right fitness professional or rehab clinician, that dual task interventions can be customized and delivered to individuals to improve cognition in certain circumstances, but also prevent falls. How people do this on their own, in my opinion, they don't. There's dual tasking already available within things like Tai Chi and dance and extra gaming. Let's just go do those things and not overthink it. That's what I prefer. But working with certain health and fitness professionals and rehab clinicians, there are ways to add very specific dual task paradigms. But even after those things are done, depending on the person's goals, like if they want to work on verbal fluency, while you're on a walk with your wife or spouse, why don't you name as many fruits and vegetables as you can, if you will. There's no superior dual task. There's also the dosage of dual task. Just doing that on your walk may not be enough. We're not really sure, but that's what dual tasking is.
Yeah. That could be a useful something for a caregiver. It depends, again, what dual task you use based on this person's interest. But one that I used often in rehab settings that made people laugh, we would just go through the alphabet with people's names. And so
cool.
We were trying to walk and keep a pace that was slightly challenging.
Yep.
And I would say Ashley, and you would say Barbara, and then I would say
exactly.
Carol.
And we do that all the time. And so whatever you're doing, it could be foods, it could be city, states, countries, it could be activities, adverbs, adjectives. Come up with a word that contains the letter but doesn't start with it. And so people love word games. They love Wordle, they love crossword, they love Scrabble, they love bananagrams. And so you can totally do that. However, I will caution people when they do it on their own, it does increase the risk for falls. So the higher the level of cognitive impairment, or if there's already gait instability or walking problems, that can cause problems. So I'm actually not suggesting that to people because I don't know who's out there wanting to try that.
Right.
But with the right supervision and why would you talk to your doctor about doing that with the right permission from your doctor or clinician? Yeah, it can certainly be helpful. But so you're right on the money with that example.
Yeah, with a caregiver or something. And you'll notice when you're walking with someone and they're struggling for what's the next letter that comes next, that they'll
word
stop.
Finding, yeah.
But they'll stop because it's hard to walk and do that upper level processing.
Yeah, that's the dual task trade-off. And so that can make things like walking a little bit more cognitively demanding. I think a lot of people walk. It's one of the most participated leisure activities in the world. And so I think it's interesting if we were to walk and be walking, having a conversation is one level, but then the word games we're talking about could be another, counting backwards by 7, which is not my idea of a good time, could be another one. And like I said, personally, I don't do that myself. I prefer to partake in extra games or table tennis or something of that regard that is a little bit more ecological as an activity. But when I'm training with people, or if someone's working out with a trainer that I've maybe certified or a physical therapist and they want to engage in these activities, I think it can be very helpful.
Yeah. No, I haven't looked at the studies, but I've heard mentioned a couple times in the brain health world that racket sports are particularly beneficial. You mentioned ping pong, and now so let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. So racket sports theoretically are beneficial for brain health. It makes sense. They require hand-eye coordination, processing speed, visuospatial, dynamic balance, reactive balance, all sorts of things. However, there's actually not a lot of research on racket sports, period. I don't care if it's tennis or table tennis. There's a lot of research positing that, but there's really not enough. If we compare table tennis or regular tennis research on cognition and brain health to dance or Tai Chi or aerobic exercise or resistance training, the latter have stacks of research articles. The former really don't, which is kind of upsetting because from our bias, I would want that to be true. But we just don't have a lot of research on that. There was a Framingham heart study, I believe it was, that showed that people that participate in racket sports did have greater longevity than those who just went to the gym. But what that kind of brought up more questions than answers, and that could have just been socioeconomic. We don't necessarily know
Right.
if that's because of the racket sports, but they can be a good activity. They can also be a risky activity. I just had a client with early Alzheimer's disease. She's been playing tennis for many years, and she just fell and had a concussion. And so these activities they have to be structured properly, and they still have to be prepared. And just because someone is aging, but they've been doing something for a long time, doesn't mean we're correcting for that gap in functional ability and cognitive ability. There's impulse control and changing direction. So to answer your question, I think, I think they're beneficial. I'm never going to tell someone, oh, that's not good for you. But we are lacking a lot of research to confirm that.
Okay. Is
At least
pickleball taking off on the West Coast like it is on the East Coast? Because pickleball is
it
going
is.
crazy.
And that's why I'm playing
Okay.
more ping pong, because I can't get on the tennis courts because I haven't played pickleball yet, and I don't want to because I'm like Scrooge McDuck and I just don't want to do it. But I'll do it eventually. But yes, it is taking off. But yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a ton of research on racket sports and cognition in older adults. However, to simplify this a little bit, there is a systematic review of open skills versus closed skills. In closed skills are things that are predictable and what's going to happen. Like if you go on an exercise machine, it's closed. There's no surprises there. Open skills, on the other hand, are things like racket sports where you don't know what's going to happen. The movements are unpredictable to a degree. It's usually externally paced by a ball or an opponent. Same thing with certain types of dance or martial arts. And it's a spectrum. So if I'm just doing boxing on a bag, that's a more closed version of it. But if I'm actually sparring, which I don't suggest, concussions, brain health, there's a little bit more reaction time and it's more open skill, right? And so what's interesting is there is a systematic review showing that older adults who participate in open skill activities do improve certain aspects of cognition more than those who participate in closed skills. That does not mean that those who participate in closed skills don't benefit, but just certain aspects of cognition like processing speed and certain aspects of executive functioning could improve with open skills. I think what we take away from that is in the fitness world, we have something called specific adaptation on imposed demand, or SAID, SAID. So we adapt to the demand, specific adaptation on imposed demand. And that probably makes sense for not just physical fitness, but also mental fitness. So we adapt to the imposed demands. And so if you have a deficit, or if you want to protect or be preventative around a certain cognitive domain, you should probably do activities that require that. So for memory, what are certain physical activities that require your active memory participation? Things like learning choreography, as seen in dance or Tai Chi, processing speed, racket sports. And so that's kind of the working theory that I operate by. There's some research to support it, not enough to support it, but that's kind of what I go by. And I think it checks out. And I think it gives people a little bit more of an answer or theory towards how can I work on this specifically while I'm also exercising.
Yeah, very cool. So is there more to the gamification beyond the Wii and Dance Dance Revolution? You said you were putting lights and people were
Yeah, so
jumping off.
there's some cool technologies out there. There's things called Blaze Pods, and like I said, virtual reality is having a big moment right now, and I think will continue to. There's nothing specific I would suggest. I mean, there's apps and things like this, but I think there's a lot of tools that could be used to give a response, right? And so if we play a brain game like Brain HQ, we're using our finger, but a lot of these technologies involve using our body. And that could be a wall with lights on it. It could be a little light that I stick on a mirror. It could be an app that I'm stepping in response to based on a number or arrow that's shown. There's all sorts of things. There's, virtual reality where I'm responding to stuff. And so I think these extra games are one way of incorporating dual tasks, of incorporating a little bit more cognitive load. For me, they're just more motivating. And for gamification, as you said, gamification just pretty much involves a game. It's playfulness. It's having a goal, having a challenge, having competition, having reward, having novelty. And that goes back to the beginning of human history. Sport includes gamification. It is a game. And so these things naturally challenge these more complex cognitive processes like executive functioning. And we should when we're planning these brain health programs, we should include those things.
Absolutely. I'm not a virtual reality person. It sort of makes me a little nauseous.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
well, I think
it's funny. You're like, oh,
the earliest virtual reality experiences were things like roller coasters and zombies and running around making
no,
people sick. But a lot
awful.
of the virtual reality experiences I partake in personally or recommend for those where it's appropriate, because it's not always, is that's okay. We like dogs. Um, is things that where you're in a fixed position, like boxing or table tennis, and you're not turning around a lot, and that really limits the amount of motion sickness that one person can have. Of course, if you have an inner ear issue or you really have motion sickness, that could be a indication. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these experiences do not elicit nausea or motion sickness when you're in this fixed position. Just it feels like you're actually playing ping pong. It feels like you're actually boxing or dancing. Those things, I give it a second chance, but we can talk about that.
Okay, maybe second chance then.
Yeah,
I'll give it a try.
yeah, we'll
I
get your
have strayed away from games since I moved beyond like Pac-Man and Missile Command on Atari in the 80s.
Yeah, well,
You weren't born yet.
oh well, I'm very familiar with those things. I'm into the whole history of gaming. But you know, it's funny you bring up Pac-Man, because when we think of that, like, what's the real world version of that? And I don't mean literally, but with Pac-Man, there's a lot of navigation. It's pretty much the rat maze, right?
Mhm.
And as we age, our hippocampus can undergo changes, especially with neurodegenerative or cognitive impairments. And you know, visuospatial navigation is a really big issue. And I recently started to think about activities that we can recommend and develop that really help people. And so one of my colleagues, Dr. David Reichland, he's a neuroscientist, but also an anthropologist. So he studies it's basically evolutionary neuroscience. He created an extra game where you're pedaling on a bike and basically going through a 2D maze. And he found significant benefits cognitively in the memory and visuospatial domains. And I've also been thinking, well, a lot of people walk, a lot of people hike. What if we could add this visuospatial component, this navigation component, this memory component? And there's a couple research articles coming out on the benefits of orienteering, using a map and compass to navigate and find things. And so I recently got in touch with the LA Orienteering Club, and we're trying to pilot some older adult and cognitive impairment friendly orienteering classes and sessions so that people can actually get this demand of visuospatial navigation and working memory, kind of like real world Pac-Man. That's kind of one of my goals. So it's interesting you brought that up.
That's awesome. On the East Coast, at least around Halloween time, there are corn mazes everywhere. We could do an activity around the corn maze.
I think what you do is you just set up a 24-hour corn maze, charge older adults to come in. I think you can make that a franchise, and I think we can retire on that.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about what you do for ACE. You created a brain health trainer course.
Yeah, so I created a course called the Brain Health Trainer course. I sold it with the Functional Aging Institute for several years, and now ACE has taken it. They carry the course, and it's also part of their Senior Fitness Specialist course. So ACE is American Council on Exercise, is the #1 certifying body of personal trainers in the world. In my opinion, they're the most evidence-based organization. I've taken a behavior change specialist course from them. I've got my medical exercise specialist through them. I think their education is top notch. So I was thrilled when I got to be able to work with them to take their senior fitness courses. They were launching it. Still love dogs. And basically combine my brain health curriculum with their senior fitness curriculum to create one super certification, if you will. So if people want to learn more about that, they can go to ACE's website, American Council on Exercise, and check out their Senior Fitness Specialist course, because that includes my curriculum. It's also offered separately, but I recommend Senior Fitness. It's more of a comprehensive course because it incorporates so many other things. And it's mostly for personal trainers, but you can also take it even if you're not a certified personal trainer, if you just want the knowledge. And so, yeah, we've certified over about 2,000 or so fitness professionals, perhaps more now, that have gone through that. And it's great because now we have trainers thinking about brain health, interested in expanding their offering, working with other people. So hopefully we can get more nerds out there to help prevent dementia.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you are reaching out to more of a multidisciplinary group. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And I've let my personal training certification expire. So maybe it's time to
Re-up.
redo.
Yeah, re-up it.
I need, yeah, cool. So what else do you want to talk about that we haven't dug
I
into
think we're
yet?
good. I've fatigued myself by this point, so I have I'm not even sure how long I've been talking, but we're here, and I appreciate you having me. And I've really enjoyed sharing this information. I think people should reach out to their friends, family, local personal trainers, physical therapists, see how they can get more active. And if you are active, get more people involved.
Yeah. So did you cover my question way back in the beginning about how would you get people more motivated?
I think so.
You talked about so many different things. Is there anything that you didn't talk about? So if you have a couch potato, like where do they start?
Sure.
Where do they?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's about external versus internal motivation. Does that person need more internal motivation? Do we need to have a motivational interviewing type discussion? Do they need to see why they need to do that? Is there a health threat that maybe they haven't perceived or admitted? Is there a mental health challenge there? Or do we just need to schedule a class or schedule a consultation and just get going? Usually I think it's the latter. It's just initiating behavior. A lot of people, I think, assume laziness, or that's just the way it's going to be because that's the way it's been. And I think just initiating a change, whatever that is usually what it takes.
Yeah. Well, I'm super grateful that you're doing what you're doing, that you're sharing your knowledge with, one person at a time in your clinic, but then you're spreading like this information because you're teaching more people, you're going on podcasts, you're about to get your PhD. So I'm excited to see what you do next.
Me too. I'm not really sure, but for this to keep going.
Yeah. So what is next for you? Do you know?
I want to be doing what I do for as long as I can. So I love Pacific Neuroscience. I plan on being there as long as I can, even if they don't want me. And I just love working with people on the ground floor, and it's just expanding what we do to be more scalable, more sustainable, more efficient.
Yeah. And if people want to find you, where do they go?
If they try, they will. So pacificlifestyle.org, or you can just Google Ryan Glatt, which that will show up. My bio on pacificlifestyle.org is the best place to find me. My contact info is on there as well.
Yes. And I found you on Instagram. So you're
Nice.
also there.
There you go. I'm also there. I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm also on Facebook.
Yeah.
I also have an address. I also have a social security number. The last one I won't share.
We won't give those out.
We won't give that out. No.
Ryan, it's been awesome chatting with you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for sharing. Perfect.